ये एक हफ्ते
Yeah, so we are waiting for the speaker to join in. He is Vinay Mohanty. He is a product lead at Facebook. He has also a venture of his own called Regis.com. He is a co-founder and a head of product there. So he will be joining in a couple of minutes. And stay tuned till you join in. Please don't leave this meeting. And let me brief you all about our course if you haven't registered it yet. The bootcamp name is Product Matters from concept to case. Uh, it will be a 4 week long course packed with live webinars such as these and continuous assignments and continuous material we flown on Slack community of IITG product and yes, like pretty much everything about product will be covered there, following by a session, a week-long session on interview preparations, and then after the completion of course, there will be a product case study competition, which all of you can participate in. So, if you really want to be a part of this course, if you really want to learn product management, you can fill up the form. It is in eCell Instagram's bio. Hello. We are facing some technical issues. The lecture will start shortly. Please don't leave the meeting.
Is anybody in the meeting facing any issues with the mic or audio? Not mic, audio. You can type in the chat if you're facing any problem.
Lecture will start shortly. Please don't.
Can we start?
One second. Sir, can you confirm your presence once? One second, sir.
He's actually muted right now.
No, he has disconnected.
Okay.
To those who are attending this meeting and watching it on live on YouTube, you were asking about the course structure and PDF for the whole schedule. We will be sharing it soon. Soon, once all the registrants get onboarded on Slack, we'll share it on Slack soon.
Can you all hear me now? I can't hear
Yes, sir.
anyone.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Just give me a moment. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay, cool. I don't see anybody. Give me a moment. I've just downloaded this client on desktop. My phone app seemed to crash. It's taking a bit of time. Almost there. Yeah, now I can see people.
Yes, shall we start?
Yes, give me a moment. I think the sound isn't connecting to my... Just give me a moment. And we'll get started. I don't know why the phone app crashes. I was planning to do this on my phone. Now I'm on my desktop, so my laptop, and I have to download a few things for this to work. Give me a moment. Let me dial back.
Yeah.
Hello, Shakti. What is your query? You can unmute yourself. So can you hear us?
So, but you're not audible.
I think it said the admin has muted your mic. I'm
Okay.
good now.
Yeah, now we are audible.
We are on. Sorry. Tech
Very good
crashes
evening,
and
ladies
stuff.
and gentlemen. I'm Yuvan.
And I'm Spriya, and we will be hosting today's session. We would love to welcome you all on behalf of IIT Guwahati. The role of product management is the most fascinating role within tech teams right now. PMs are closest to the center of the action, have a disproportionate amount of influence over key decisions, and often go on to start their own companies. It's no surprise then that product management has begun to show up on lists of the best, hottest, and most promising careers.
We have with us today Mr. Vinay Mohanty, product manager at Facebook, to explain to us what PM is and what PM does. Mr. Vinay is an alumnus of Department of Design, IIT Guwahati. He has also worked as chief product officer and senior product leader at various companies and startups across Europe, US, and India. So, without much ado, we welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Vinay Mohanty.
Thank you. That's great. You all don't have to be so formal. I'm an alumnus, so let's keep this as an open chat and ask me anything. I think Ayush gave me a few topics of prompts to talk through, and I'll talk through them. But before that, I thought it might be useful to tell you a little bit more about my background and how did I make my journey. So I see the topic of today is how to break into PM. So the way I'll structure this, I'll tell you about my story. Then I'll tell you about how I coach people to break into PM. So as a part of Facebook and even otherwise, I have coached over the years, like I would say, hundreds of people to break into product management. And sometimes product management is hard, and let's acknowledge that, because everybody wants an experienced product manager. Because as you all said, it's an important role. Every company that you talk to wants an experienced product manager. Either they have an associate PM program, like I think Flipkart has a APM program, Google has an APM program, Facebook has something called RPM, it's called Rotational Product Manager. So some companies have these programs, but if companies don't have a program like that, then we'd always want an experienced PM. But it becomes a bit of a chicken and egg. How do you make an experienced PM if nobody will give you the job of a PM, right? So I'll talk a little bit about that, of how I've coached people over the years to break into PM without that formal experience. And then, like I said, Ayush gave me a few prompts. So we started a little bit late, so I'm happy to carry on a little bit longer. But I'm aiming to speak for, let's say, 20 to 30 minutes at best, and then open the floor for questions. I see 106 people on this call. That's great. I'd love to take your questions, and please be as open and direct as you'd like. One of the advantages is I studied there, albeit 15 years ago. I graduated in 2005-06. But I can sort of relate to that ecosystem, and I grew up in India and all of that. So please don't feel the need to be formal, or don't hesitate too much. Cool. So I can't see anybody, so I don't know if you can all still hear me or not, because I think everybody's video is turned off. It would help if one of the moderators can stay on the call with me, just so that I know that you can all still hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. Because otherwise the screen just goes blank, and I don't know if you can hear me, if I'm legible or not. Cool. So let's go into who is. So Yuvan, right? Is that Yuvan?
Yes, sir. Yuvan, yes.
Cool. So you stay on the call, Yuvan, then.
Okay.
So let's start with my journey. So I graduated in 2005. I studied product design, and my concentration at IIT was, I don't know how design department works today. Back in the day, a lot of us were very focused on interaction design, user experience, HCI, all of that. So my first job was in a company called Capgemini, which is a services company. So it's a bit like TCS, Infosys, Accenture. So they don't build a product; they build products for clients who have a product. And Capgemini was a financial services company. So the first jobs I worked on were build a mortgage application or a loan application for HSBC, Morgan Stanley, that sort of thing. Back in 2005, when I graduated, nobody knew what to do with a designer. So designers in India, product designers, like PM, like it was very nascent. So people hired us into, at that time, our salaries were, I would say, 5-6 lakhs, which was a decent amount in those days. This is 15 years ago. And people hired us and they'd be like, yaar tum aato gayo, and we pay you like a senior engineer. What do we do with you? So very early on, like some of us had to define our own scope and careers and so on. But then, and then there were some good parts in Capgemini. We started working there as a designer. Over time, the first decision I made in my career was I said I don't want to work with service companies. And the reason I emphasize on that is what would happen in Capgemini is you'd work with a client, let's say HSBC. You make some assumptions. You say loan mein ye sab hona chahiye, and you go through that. And you build your thing, you give it to the client, but you see nothing before and after. So before you see some research, but you don't see after, because then you're on to the next client, right? And that to me felt like a major gap. If you want to be a really solid PM, designer, engineer, whatever you want to be in software, tech, or even in industrial design, I think one of the biggest pieces of learning happens when you see your own work and your assumptions play out. Like let's say you assume XYZ should work like this, and it doesn't because the market adopts it differently or users do a different action. So then you look at the analytics, user research post your launch and learn from that, right? You'll hear a term sometimes called cradle to grave management, which is from an idea to multiple iterations of a software and then to sunset it. And that's what I felt was missing. So about 6 months to a year into my career, I decided I'll never work with service companies again or consultancy. And again, I have tons of very successful friends in McKinsey, BCG, who made a very different decision. Like they like the thrill of a new client, a new problem every 6 months. I thought that's not how I am. I like going deep, staying in an area, exploring that, building that. So after that, I started working with Qualcomm in India, and there was an outpost called Tech City. And then I worked at Pubmatic, which was an ad tech company. And we used to work out of a one-bedroom flat, very typical startup. Doing that, I started getting exposed to very good product managers, engineers, so on. And at some point, I thought half the job of a product designer is deciding what to build. So like kind of scoping it out, deciding users, who is it for, so on. And then you work with engineers, PMs to build it. But in the beginning part of it, your closest collaborator as a product designer is the product manager. And towards the build part of it, it becomes the tech lead or the engineer. So as a designer, I was lucky enough to be exposed to that entire life cycle of things. And over time, I went through experiences where I stayed a product designer, and then I grew up the ranks, became a product design manager for the first 5-6 years in my career. And I started seeing that designers and engineers are doing their job very well. Like we were building whatever we were supposed to build to high quality. But then I started seeing that we are building the wrong thing in the right way. Like for example, if a problem is solved by building a bottle and you're building a glass, it doesn't matter how good that glass is, it is not going to solve the problem. Like if you define the problem as I want to hold water and I want to run with it and it should not spill, no matter how beautiful or functional a glass you make, it just doesn't cut it. So then that process of inquiry and somewhat of frustration to say, we've built this, what happened, where's the data, why did we even build this? I started playing the de facto product manager role. So I moved from design management to working very closely with PMs. And over the years, a few product managers said, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, hell yeah. And luckily, by that time, I was exposed to the entire software development lifecycle. I'd been a front-end engineer a little bit myself. I'd been a designer for 5-6 years, a design manager. Worked very closely with product management all throughout my career. So then I made the shift into product management. So in the same company where I was, I changed my title from design manager to PM. The first 3 to 6 months, I was afraid. I was afraid that somebody will find out that I am not a good PM or I am a lateral entry into PM. And directly, because I had worked by then for 7 years or 8 years, I became a senior PM. And I would hire junior PMs and other PMs. And I'd feel like a bit like an imposter that I cracked into this 6 months ago. But at the same time, I realized that actually a lot of parts of the job I knew and I was doing very well because I'd worked alongside product management for the last 7, 8 years, right? And PM is sort of a general manager job. Good PMs always expose you to parts of their job. So then I grew up the ranks and I became a head of product, director of product. I started hiring people. But I think that fear and a little bit of that fear actually helped me. I think for about 1 to 2 years, I must have read every damn book there is on product management, strategy, people management, blogs, courses, certificates. So I sort of up-leveled in a year or two massively, just in terms of theoretical way of structured thinking and so on. And PM as a field, it's very multifaceted. Like you can go into any aspects of it. You can go into strategy, you can go into users, you can go into building financial models, you can go into analytics, any part of it, right? So the learning never ends. Like even the PMs I lead now at Facebook, I have a team of about 7 PMs. Even those, we always talk about what are we learning, where are each PM's gaps and so on. So that was a bit like my journey. So after the company where I switched, that was called Photobox, where we are building photo e-commerce products. It's a bit like Print Venue in India. You can put a photo on a T-shirt, you can put your designs on cards, so on. After that, I worked with Sky, Vodafone just before that. Then I was a chief of product in a Series A/B startup. Then I came to Facebook. And I've been at Facebook for now close to 4 years. So that's a bit of my career arc and how I became a PM. Before I go into the prompts and questions Shreya sent my way, or Ayush sent my way, let's take a quick 5-minute round of questions if the moderator can help with that. Or I'm happy to do questions at the end if that works better. You tell me.
Anything up to you, sir. We can take the questions right now if you want to.
Yeah, I don't mind. So that I've gone through a section, let's do questions. Then I'll go through the second section and let's do questions, just so that people don't have to hold a thought in their head for another 10, 15 minutes.
If there are any questions, please write them out in the chat box.
So where am I? So I look at chat, or what do I do?
Yeah, I'll tell you, sir, the questions.
Okay, you'll tell me. And please don't call me sir. Call me Vinay. What's your name? Do you go by Shreya or do you go by something else?
Shreya, sir.
Shreya, cool.
So the first question, how important is the knowledge of technology, front end, back end, and microservices used to build a product?
Who asked this question? Can I know a bit? Can I see them as well? It'd be great to get to see more people. So whoever asked the question, can you come? I've never used Teams much. We have our own product in Facebook. Can I see 2 videos? Like if I go to large gallery preview or something, can the person who asked unmute their video and come on the call?
Shaikh Abdul Akbar, if you can come.
Can everybody else mute, please? I hear some static.
Hello.
Hi, Shaikh. Cool. So your question is, hi. Good to meet you. Please don't call me sir. So your question is, how important is technology? And you broke it out into 3: front-end, back-end, microservices, and the knowledge of that, right? So I'm not from CS background, but I think I know tech enough. Like I've always worked with engineers and so on. Tech is a medium. A good PM is a good PM. Like I often interview questions. I ask, design a chair, or tell me how would you design a microwave. And the reason we do that is because the fundamentals of being a good product manager are agnostic of the medium. Like you see, Elon Musk is designing rockets. His previous thing was PayPal. No connection between rockets and PayPal, right? That's how we'd like a good solid PM to be. Now, to answer the specifics of your question, how important is it to know components of front-end, back-end microservices? Not at all. However, you should be able to speak the language of the product you're building. So if you're the PM for an API, then you shouldn't be afraid of what an API is. Like you should know enough to work with engineers if they tell you this field is unmutable, this cannot be transformed in this way. You should know and learn enough at that point in order to work with them. Because otherwise, you become a bit of a messenger boy or messenger girl. If you don't understand just enough, you cannot add value. Like if I'm a PM for, let's say, building this thing that my phone rests on, then I don't need to know things about wood today, but I have to be curious enough to understand ye banta kaise hai, how is this made, like is it made through what material, and I have to go into it as time needed. If I stay hands-off and I go, I don't care about wood, I'll just be high level, you can still be a PM, but I think over time you start losing respect. So I would urge you to go into the medium, whatever it is. Do you need to know it in order to be successful? No, not at all. I hope that answers your question, Jake.
Yes, sir. So you can call me Akbar, Mr. Vinay. So I just wanted to add one point to that. So when I say these technologies, right, there are multiple ways these products are built. Different types of technologies for front end, back end exist these days. So when we talk about product and its implementation, do a product manager necessarily need to understand these technologies which are being used to build? Is basically my question.
No, I mean, like I said, you need to understand why is the technology used. Like, for example, I'll take an example. So you can build an app on iOS native, Android native, or you can build it on React, for those who know those. Now, I just need to, now if somebody says, hey, Vinay, you're a PM on our team, we build this app on React. The first thing I need to understand is why React? Why did they choose that? And typically the answer could be, because if you're building an iOS native, Android native, you have to build it for that platform. So you have to build twice. You have to build once for Android, once for iOS. In React, because it's JavaScript based, you can build once, deploy everywhere, right? Now, did I know all of this before I got the job? No, but I learned it. I kind of asked a few people questions. I Googled, I read what is the difference. And then I probed it enough. So I asked them, hey, what is the trade-offs? Why are some apps built on iOS? Why are some apps built on React? And then I did my research. I know that if you want to do, let's say, something very involved with touch, Zoom, AR, VR, those things lag a bit on web technologies and React. They're much better integrated with the hardware of the product. Now, if your app needs to do some of that, then maybe React is not a good choice. iOS, Android, or native is. If your app doesn't need to do that, then React is a great choice. So that's just an example of how much you need to know it. So the answer is you need to know enough to be able to help decision making. You don't need to know how to code it, and then you learn on the job. You need to know as much as is needed. Like a PM is like, you do whatever is needed to make your product successful. So if you need to learn it, you learn it because your environment demands it. But I would say most mature roles in companies don't expect a PM to code or know tech or any medium at its depth. You should be able to zoom into it when and where needed. So I think what I'll abstract this is an important skill for a PM is an innate sense of curiosity and ability to learn anything very fast. If you are very closed, saying, I like X, I don't like Y, and I want to do X, then sometimes you'll struggle as a PM because you are needed to do whatever is needed to be done. Like there's some PMs who go into a company and they're like, oh, I don't like this company because the engineers need me to be technical. Or they go into a company and they go, oh, there's too much of financial business speak. I don't like it. And then I always talk to these PMs and I go, every damn company you go, your shape of PM is slightly different. And if you're very rigid and you say, I don't like X, I don't like Y, I don't like Z, then you'll have a tough life, kid. But having said that, you're free to choose your own competencies over time. Like some PMs are more technical, some PMs are more business. But if you start out, be open, learn whatever's needed to learn.
Got it, sir. Thank you. And also, sir, one last question which I want to add during the session, probably when if you can cover certain skill sets as to what kind of tools and particular like UI, UX design.
I think Ayush sent me a few questions. So we'll do one more. I'm just conscious of time. We'll do one more question and then I'll go into, let's say, skill sets and some of the prompts I would say.
Sure, sir.
Do one more.
Thank you, sir.
Most welcome.
So the next question is from Shyam. He asks, how has the role of a product manager changed over the years?
Cool. I think that was a question in the prompts as well. So I'll answer both. So I can see there are three prompts. One is skill set. One is okay. So there are three prompts. I'll answer all of these. So the topic one was how has PM changed and how it is evolving. Topic two is some skill sets, experience, knowledge. And I think a topic three I was asked was, in my many years, how does work change as you become more senior as a PM? So I'll answer those three, right? Let's start with the first one, which is how has PM evolved over the years? That's a great question. So PM is still evolving. It is in some companies still very new. In some companies it is very mature. In some companies it is very different from each other. So it's ever evolving, I would say. How has it changed over the years? I think over the years, PM has become more deeper into the why of building a product. And we expect the what and how to come from engineers, designers. Of course, we will partner. So I'd say 10 years ago, PM used to be, a PM had to do multiple things. So let me take an example, otherwise this is abstract. So let's say, I'll take a very generic example, so it's not attached to technology. So I'll go back to the bottle and water carrying example, right? So let's say the problem we are trying to solve is transport water from point A to B in small quantities while running. Now, if you frame the problem that way, a glass is not a good answer because it falls while running. But a glass with a lid becomes the answer, right? Now, if I change the problem a little bit more, that while running, it should be comfortable to run. Maybe glass is no longer an answer. And you see runners have this, like a bottle attached to their arm and so on, right? What I'm trying to get at here is this is the why of the product. This is the why and who for. You saw how the answer glass to bottle changes if I change the context of who is it for, when do you need to use it, so on and so forth. So think of this as the core job of the product manager. The why, who is it for, will it be commercially successful, can we build it, is the market for glasses and bottles differentiated enough, do we need yet another bottle, who will buy it, at what price point, can we produce it reliably, like if we produce it for 10 rupees, can we sell for 12? This sort of business tech amalgamation, this is all why, is the core job of the PM. Then comes the what. How should that bottle exactly behave, look, etc. There you have massive partnership. You have designers, you have user researchers, you have engineers who are working on that plastic, and everybody will collaborate. But your job has been to define some boundary conditions, saying, yeah, this should be under 10 rupees because we've done market research, blah, blah. Or an engineer might have a great idea saying, let's make it 15 and sell it as a premium thing. Then you'll work with your engineer designer to reposition in the market. And then finally comes the building of it, which is, can you produce this bottle at scale, deliver in one day, Do you have the right factories, logistics, delivery? So you work with engineers, right? So if you think of this bottle making as why did you make this bottle? Does the world need another bottle? What is the exact definition of the bottle, price point, etc., and how to make it, ship it? Break product development into these three parts. 10 years ago, PMs had to do all of them. Or I would say commercial and business suit types marketing used to dictate the why. PMs were more friends of engineering and design, and they used to come into the what and how. Now, PMs are much more strategic as well. So we define the why, we define the what and how, and in fact, the what and how, good mature PMs step back a bit, and they give context so that engineers, designers can lead. So I would say that has changed. If you see a company that asks the PM to be very involved and detailed in the how and what, then I always question that company saying, this is a partnership. Why is the PM spoon-feeding designers, engineers, saying bottle should be blue, should be this? Like, what is the designer doing? What is the engineer? So I would say that has changed over the years, that PMs now lean on other functions and make them mini PMs in certain stages of product. So in fact, at Facebook, we evaluate PMs. So I'll ask an engineer, so let's say a PM reports into me, I'll ask the engineer at the end of a cycle, have you become a better product thinker by working with that PM? And if the answer is no, then I know that PM will not be successful long term. Best PMs are trying to make their own job redundant by uplifting everybody else to think like a PM. So that's what has changed over the last, I would say, 10 years. A second question, which I think Akbar asked and was also a prompt, is how do skill sets and what skills should you focus on and what would be relevant long term? I think I answered part of that by saying why, what, and how. But when we coach PMs, or like if you ever appear for the Facebook PM interview, we look at three competencies, and I think of that as a good rubric to think of a PM job, three broad skill sets. The first skill set we call product sense. Think of product sense as without hard data, how do you logically, using strategy, gut, intuition, a logical, defensible thesis, build a product? Let me give you a demo or practice it, right? Like let's say I can see behind Swaya, there's that background some of you have designed, which says ESAIL, IIT Guwahati. It has three like orange, pink things in the background and so on, right? Let's say somebody was the PM for that. What are the competencies or skill sets they went through for that? So first thing, you use it. So let's first deconstruct its actual use. You use it as a background for people like me. I'm a speaker. I look at that and I go, okay, cool, ESAIL, IIT Guwahati, but I have no clue what that dot there is and that thing on the side is. Looks interesting, but I have no clue. Maybe that is part of what the designers, engineers, whoever built it together thought of. Maybe it's not. Maybe that product is failing because you'd like the reader to look at it and go, wow. Whichever it is, someone somewhere thought of why are we doing this, who for, and then constructed it, right? So that is product sense. Now you have no data. You didn't do research of let's do survey with 20 readers, show it. You may have done little bits of it, but you don't have data at scale. Like you didn't talk to 1,000 people, you didn't see their sentiment, you didn't do that. But still, you made some assumptions and you designed something. That process of who is the user, why are we making this, what are choices we make, how do we prioritize, everything is known as product sense. That's one core competency. And the kind of questions we always ask is, who are you building this for? Who is the user? Why will they buy this? What is the differentiator? How will you position? What is the core problem this is solving? Like, what is the problem that background is solving? So one, it's telling me, it's a branding. It's reminding me I'm talking to ESAIL IIT Guwahati. But you could have just written ESAIL IIT Guwahati. You have designed it more than that. So there's something else you want that logo to solve, right? Like me as a user, I don't know what that is solving. So that's an example. So that is product sense. A second part we call product execution. in product execution, a good mature company like Facebook will think of two kinds of execution: is how you build it, which is a bit of technology and so on. But more than the technology, we focus on how do you measure success. So again, taking that background, I'm a sample set of one. I said I don't understand that dot and the three things. But how do you understand at scale? Maybe I'm the wrong person. Maybe let's say you invited Elon Musk and Elon Musk loved it and went, great. I totally get it. If you had just written ESL IIT Guwahati, that would have been a downer. I love that dot and the three marks. So maybe I'm the wrong slight market. But how do you measure it tangibly? Because this is opinions, right? How do you understand it legibly? Like, do you ask a survey? Do you talk to people? What do you do? The measurement helps you understand how successful that background is in achieving its objectives. So think of this as analytics. So products generally have a life cycle. People talk about retention, acquisition analytics. One of the best books I would recommend is a book called Lean Analytics. So it talks about how to build any product or any startup faster with data. So that's the kind of mindset and thinking. Just to give you a very, very quick example on analytics. I ask this as an interview question sometimes. Let's say one of you is the CEO of Tinder. I think people have heard of Tinder, right? Yes, Suya, have you heard of Tinder?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. You've heard of Tinder. It's a dating app. There are many other dating apps. There's Bumble, there's High Five, whatever, right? I sometimes ask people this question: how do you measure success for a dating app? And people say, oh, how many people found matches? And I go, is that really success? That's just what you can measure easily. What indicates happiness in dating? That is your true measurement. Like, was it a successful date? Then people go, oh, but that successful date is outside our platform because that dating app doesn't see what's a successful date. Then I push people to go, your platform will be more successful if you can get and understand that hook. So maybe after the date, they've been chatting, they've gone cold, ask them, hey, did you go on a date? How was it? Let them rate you back. That's how you've understood the true success. Otherwise, let's say Tinder helped find many dates, but they matched people wrongly, and those people hate Tinder when they come back. And they never go back to Tinder again because it is great on matches, but it seems to match me to the wrong person. So that's an example of analytics at practice. And similarly, with a bit of technology and what is Agile, Scrum, Lean, that's the second competency. Just to recap, product sense, which is vision, strategy, user. Second is execution and how to build products. Very focused on analytics and how the process works. The third one is behavior and people dynamics. Like I said, we call it leadership and drive. PMs are a typical servant leader role. If you want authority, this is not the job for you. You have a lot of money and you have a lot of influence. You do not have authority. Good PMs do not dictate terms to engineers, designers, others. They influence. They make others see what that PM is seeing with good arguments, good storytelling, good logic. So we often test for that. So for example, we ask questions of, let's say Swaya was the PM for that logo and that background. And let's say it is failed. I will ask Swaya, why did it fail? And if she says, oh, designer's fault, they didn't listen to me, or somebody else's fault, then she's not a good PM. Because she's passing on the blame instead of going, what context should I have provided to people working with me so they could do a better job? So often we test for how do you handle conflict? How do you understand other people? So we ask questions like, tell me of your most recent conflict. Tell me when you failed. Tell me when you succeeded with very little resources. Like to Akbar's point, tell me when you went to a very technical company, you did not understand anything, but you still added value. So that's the shape of a PM we want. We want them to have very high EQ. It's a hard job. Like people will So the job is a bit like this. If the team succeeds, you say engineers did it, designers did it, they did it. If it fails, you put yourself forward and you say I did it. If you cannot be that person, this is not the career for you. Because you will be the sort of top-down dictatorial PM, you won't really be growing and championing others, and you won't be a servant leader. So those are the three skill sets or competencies we check for, which will stay 10, 20 years down the line because they're very fundamental. How do you work with people? Because you have to work with tons of people as a PM. How do you understand markets, users, strategy, vision? And how do you measure and build that your understanding is correct? Because it doesn't matter how well you understand things if you cannot build it to a high degree, right? Like I was a designer. I can see in that East Cell IIT Guwahati, the E is like three things, which is part of the bulb as well, right? Now, obviously, I can see that detailing. If I can see that detailing and I understand that detailing, that makes me a PM who can then collaborate with that designer or whoever thought of that idea better. So I would say those are your three broad skill sets or paths. Then I'll answer the third question and then let's do questions from you. That'll be the end of my talking. The third prompt that I think I sent me was as you grow senior as a PM, how does the role change? So I've been a PM, I would say, for the last 10 years. And the way seniority and PM changes is, again, I'll go back to the why, what, how framework. As a junior PM, we want you to be in the how and what, which is understand the details, execute, understand the numbers, craft. As a more senior PM, we want you to focus more on the why. So why are we building this? Who is it for? Think strategically and have the ability to zoom into details tactically. So more senior PMs can zoom in and out. Junior PMs, I would ask them to travel up the stack. Pick a small area, master it. When you pick a small area, always try and understand where does this fit in, like what is the ecosystem of it, but know your details. Like I have a manager right now. He's also an IIT alumni, much more senior than me, and he was one of the first PM leaders, used to work with Travis Kalanick at Uber. So his name is Vinay Ramani. And he's a great product leader, and he's my manager right now at Facebook. So he sometimes tells me of this story that Travis Kalanick at Uber used to always say, the God is in the details. So Vinay, like my manager, always reminds us and a lot of the PMs we lead that you should, as a PM, have the ability to zoom into the details, understand why it matters, how it changes your user's life, and so on. So more junior PM, more detailing, all that. Senior PM, strategy. And as you become more senior, you don't always have to be a PM manager and lead other PMs. You can be a senior IC who does more complicated products. Like you can do new products. So luckily at Facebook, Google, all of these companies, and even in startups in India these days, they're very cognizant that you shouldn't have to become a people manager in order to become senior and get better paid. So they always have a principal track and a people manager track. So principal or a very senior PM, they would work at, like, for example, let's say one of our most senior PMs at Facebook is now working on a new version of Facebook or a product. And that very senior PM works with Mark Zuckerberg and other VPs to define it. That PM doesn't have anybody else reporting into them because their full time goes in defining this massive pivot or change the company wants to make, right? This is a fictional example. Facebook is not making any pivots. So, or it may, like I won't discuss those things, right? So that's an example of how you can be IC or people manager, and that's how the job changes. And as you become more senior, you're expected to coach others, coach engineers, designers. If you're more junior, you're expected to get your craft, right? So I'd say that's generally how the field changes. With that, I've kind of answered all the three prompts. I'm happy to take any questions from the moderator or others.
Yeah, the next question is from Sarthak. So he asked, what would a PM do in a startup where the app is just being launched on stores?
Can Sarthak come on video?
Sarthak, copy. Are you there?
Wait, it will take 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm seeing the chat. Sorry, I didn't see. I'm seeing the chat, and there's some questions here as well. I want to speak to more. Cool, Sarthak is here. Next, I'm going to answer Richa's question, then Niharika's, and then I'll go to Sai Shreya. Sarthak, go on. Sorry, can you repeat your question, Sarthak? No, Shreya, do you mind letting me know what the question is again? Sorry.
So he asked, what would a PM do in a startup where the app has just been launched on stores?
Cool. So what would a PM do?
Hey, so like how can you add value?
Yeah, how can you add value? So if you remember my first example, products are like people. So if some of you Google, or I think I can share my screen here, right? Let me see if I can show you an image very quickly. Bear with me a moment. Yeah, I have the image. Let me see how. I know Teams is quite popular, but we have our own software at Facebook, like we have Facebook for Work. So I'm not very familiar with Teams. Screen share, desktop. What do you see? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Shreya, I heard a yeah from you. So you can see this product lifecycle thing?
No, it's not actually visible. I thought it was loading, but I can't really see now.
Okay, maybe Microsoft is not that good and you should try out Facebook's product. No, just kidding. Allow Teams to observe my screen. Yes, allow. I can see and I can hear now. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, now we can.
And do you see something, the graph saying product lifecycle?
Yeah, we can see that.
Cool. So to answer your question, Sarthak, what do you do if your app has just launched? If your app has just launched, your app had an intention of launch before that. Let's say your app, it's a new app or a new version, and it launched because it wanted more users, more retention, more money, something. So the first thing a PM should do is understand why did you build that app, why did you launch it, and help the group and the company understand, is that why actually coming true after launch or not? So this is the life cycle of a product. Products, I sometimes, when I coach people, I say products are like people. Products are born, there's an introduction phase. They are young adults, growth, then they become older, maturity. And if nobody tends to them, they die. Like Nokia died. Lots of products die because they couldn't stay relevant in the changing market anymore. So before they die, you generally plan a product extension. For example, Facebook, Instagram stories saw that our fit with younger adults is reducing. We saw more engagement in ephemeral ways of content sharing. So if you write a post on Facebook, it stays forever, right? Whereas we saw more young adults doing posts that come and go, like stories. So we built stories after that. So that's an example of a product extension. So post-launch, you would try and see, have you succeeded in terms of why you launched? If not, you would iterate. If you have succeeded, then you would plan the next version and make it more great and awesome and so on. And you'd kind of think of products like that. Introduction, growth, maturity, decline. And sometimes it's not linear. After introduction, to go to growth, you may need 5 iterations because your product did not land in the market. So that's what you would do. Does that answer your question, Sarthak?
Yeah, sure it does. Definitely. Thanks.
Cool. Let's go to, like I said, Niharika Mukherjee. Is Niharika around? Swale, can you help, please?
I don't know if she's there. Should I read her question now?
So is Niharika around? I see she asked a question about management student. I took up marketing as my major.
Is Niharika?
Cool.
I'm not very sure if she's still there.
Okay, cool. I'll just answer her question. So Niharika has asked that she has taken up marketing as a major, and her elective subject is product management. And could I give a brief scope of what can she do as a product manager and what are the skills to brush up? So I feel I've spoken about skills. Niharika, just to recap, the basic skills are user-focused thinking, and there's some great books on that. There's a book called, so I'd recommend anybody who's interested in PMing, read these 2-3 books, Lean Analytics, Lean Startup. There's an author called Marty Kagan. He has a book called Inspired, and he has a recent book called Empowered. Read these 4. I think these 4 should almost be like your fundamental books. Then, if you're coming from management background and less technical, I think focus more on the why and business side of things. I mean, don't shy away from the tech, but maybe that's your depth and your strength. So read more books on strategy, on user-led thinking, and things like that. So I think that's what you should brush up. I'll answer Richa's question next. Richa Gore. Is Richa on the line? Let's see if we can get her on video. If we can't, I'll just answer that.
Sir, Niharika has come.
Niharika has come back. Okay, cool. Does she want to come on video? Hi, Niharika. Can you hear me? No, I think either Niharika is muted or she can't hear me. Either way, hi. We'll move on from that question because I've answered that. Is Richa around?
Hi, Vinay.
Oh, that's Richa. Sorry. Hi, Richa. So your question is, how do I analyze the performance of products post-launch and realize the reasons for different behaviors that you might not expect? So that's a great question. So let's make this tangible. Coming back to the bottle example, let's say your thesis of making a product, your hypothesis. So products are always bets, right? Like post-launch, even after 2-3 cycles, you may not know have you actually fulfilled that promise or not. So we always think of products in terms of hypothesis, assumptions, bets. And if you have done your homework, you have more confidence in a bet. So let's say post-launch, you're seeing different behavior. Let's make this tangible. Your thesis was a beautiful glass with a lid on top is good for runners. They can strap it around their arms. And your thesis was it's great because it's a glass plus as well as a running thing. And you did it for people who travel a lot and are great runners. So they don't want to have utensils and all that. So that's why you made it. Post-launch, you realize that, actually they don't like it because it's cumbersome, and even though I've made a shape of an arm here in the glass, it's not great because when they use it as a glass and they try to hold it, it's irritating. How you find that out? You can find that out through analytics. Analytics always tells you the what. It may tell you within your market segment where you thought you will market and see great returns, people are not buying. So that's the what. You see your numbers not working. And then you have to do qualitative user research, go talk to a few people to understand the why. A number often can tell you the what, but it may not tell you the why. So whenever we think of understanding anything, we always bring the right brain and left brain together, which is the number and the person and the why. Just depending on numbers, just depending on why, both are incomplete. So that's how you understand something, then you incorporate it and you do another iteration. Cool. I'll go to Shreyas Ray's question. Can a person who has a no technical background break into PM domain? Of course. Some of the best PMs I've worked with have been art graduates, Japanese history graduates, nothing to do with tech. And again, if they are in a tech company, they should have the ability to pick up tech and shouldn't shy away from it. I love this question, so I'm going to take it. Suraj, can you talk about the role of writing and communication in the PM job? This is a brilliant question. Actually, I'll see. Can you see my sort of mini home library? So this is all my books. There's a book I was recently reading. I'm trying to see if it's somewhere around and I can find it. Give me 30 seconds. I can't seem to find it. Like, it's probably somewhere behind. So, Suraj, thank you for coming online. Suraj, your question is brilliant. I'll first abstract it a bit of why it is brilliant. As a PM, you don't produce anything. The engineer does their engineering. Designer does design. What the fuck do? You coordinate people, and you get people together, and you help them do their work better. Your main tool in doing that is telling good stories, good arguments, convincing people, understanding them, then reframing things. In order to do all of this, you have to be top of your game in storytelling, writing, communication. So for every PM there is good, clear thinking and good, clear communication is a fundamental skill. How do you improve? You learn. Like recently I was reading a book called Writing Well by Hans Zimmerman or somebody. Like, you can Google the book. It's called On Writing Well. I read those things. Like 15 years into my career, I still read those things. And then we do trainings on how to present. We think about like how to tell better stories. Recently, I took all my PMs on a storytelling workshop where we learned how are movies made. Like, why are certain movies so great? Because they have a beginning, they have a drama, they have an end. Can I tell you a story like that? So we learn. So it's super, super important. No matter whether you're a tech PM, this PM, that PM, if you're a bad communicator, you will struggle as a PM. Again, having said that, a lot of people mistake communication with the flair to speak. Some people I know, great PMs, they struggle with English, they struggle with speaking, but they think very clearly, they write very clearly. So there's this PM who learned English after she was 28 years old. So for her, English is still her second language. So she comes very prepared to a meeting. She writes everything down, she practices it, so on. So don't let English or a language barrier or how somebody speaks with what accent, etc., be mistaken for clear communication and thinking. Those are different things. Cool. Suraj, I guess I've answered your question.
Yes, sir, for sure.
Shubhas, will building a product on no-code platform and having that on my resume, will that help you in a product interview? Look, building any product will help you in a product interview. Okay. Whether it's no code or code, the fact that you've built something will help you. In fact, when I coach PMs, I ask them to do 3 things. If somebody is coming new into PM, I'd run 3 tracks for them. The first track is build your own product. Second track is learn the theory, the frameworks, the fundamentals, etc., books, blogs. A third track is prepare for an interview. So, because ultimately, if you want a job, you should practice for the job as well. So, work backwards, understand what does the job need, talk to a few people, understand what the interview is like. But you cannot do the interview and succeed there just by preparing for the interview. Because if it's a senior PM, an experienced PM, they will find out that you've just come prepared for the interview. At the moment they ask you a deeper question, it'll show your gaps in thinking. So a little bit of interview preparation, lot of reading, thinking, lot of doing. Because PM is a bit like a general management field. You can read every damn book there is on the world, but be a bad PM. because you've never actually built anything on your own. So one of the first things I ask people to do is to try and build your own product. And imagine you're the CEO of a company. I want to give you $5 million. Like, I don't have $5 million, but let's say I want to give you 10,000 pounds, which I can afford. And if one of you has a great idea, but in order for that to be a great idea, I want to see your pitch deck. I want to see your prototype. I want to see the market, etc., etc. So I ask people to do all of that for whatever problems or products they're passionate about. So if you've built anything, great. If you've built it in a code or no code, doesn't matter. The questions I would ask you are more about why did you build this thing? Like, is your thesis correct? Who is this market for? If you're going into a bit more of an early stage technical company, they might ask you why no code? What are the advantages, disadvantages? Let's say you're hugely successful and you want to scale it up. What part would you recreate in code and why? Things like that.
Great. Thanks a lot. That was an excellent answer.
Then I think Shreyas asked a question of, I will be finished in a bit. Do you want to come here and say hello? So we can, here's my elder daughter. I have 2 kids. She's 4.5, and my other boy is almost a year old. She hears us talk a lot about products at home. My wife is actually an engineering manager at Goldman Sachs. She also went to IIT. She's an engineer. So our kids hear us do a lot of tech talk at home. And just as an example, when she was younger, once she was scribbling furiously on like random pieces of paper, and I asked her, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Daddy, I'm writing a strategy." So that's the words our kids grow up with at times. Shreyas, your question was, I am the founder of a startup, Ragis. Actually, my wife is the founder. I was her assistant. So how important do I think PMs are in startups? Very, very important. PMs are sometimes more important in startups because 95% of startups fail. And if you look at historical data, startups are not failing because their tech was bad. They're failing because nobody wanted the thing that they built. So there's no market for your product. So PMs can help a startup achieve product market fit and success much faster by thinking through the problem, validating it, making sure the risk is not there. So in fact, apart from bigger companies, some of the startups are the biggest hirers for PMs. And for a startup, who is the first PM of the startup? The founder who started the startup. So whenever I talk to startups, I ask them, why do you need a PM? And generally, bad startups think they need a PM because the founder is too busy. Good startups think the founder has reached their limits of product thinking or they need to focus somewhere else. And generally, the PM reports into the founder in a startup. Because without PM thinking, you don't have a startup. So your founder was the first PM.
Thank you, sir. That was insightful.
Yeah, just a little bit. We're 15, 20 minutes over time. I'll take 2 more questions. Somebody asked, can I repeat the books for PM? Somebody else wrote Lean Analytics, Lean Startup, Inspired, Empowered by Marty Kagan. There's a book called The Mom Test. I'll write it here. The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick. Then there's a book on strategy called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Again, like I said, you can read every book there is and still be a bad PM, but the books generally help you think more clearly and so on. Surat, as work-life balance, as I transition from product designer to PM, have I observed changes in work-life balance? Yes and no. No, because I always used to think like a PM, even when I was a designer. And that's why I gravitated towards PM. Like, I was very unhappy if my product is not successful. It can be a beautiful design, but if it's not successful, it's not successful, right? Like, I was never the sort of designer who wants to win design awards. I was the sort of designer who wants to design for massive usage and success. So for me, I always thought like a PM. My work-life balance was equally good or bad. yes, as a PM, the job does get a little bit more intense because of all that servant leadership I told you about. When a thing fails, the designer is still one hop away. When a thing fails, the PM is at the forefront of it. So as a PM, I sometimes spend more mental cycles thinking about will we fail? How can I prevent this? So in that sense, work-life balance has gotten a little bit more intense, but I think work-life balance is something that you control. It's not just because you're a PM. I want to take more questions from females on the chat. So more girls and females. I would encourage more girls to take up product management tech roles. I think some of the best PMs, empathetic leaders I know are female leaders. And I think just not enough. I don't see enough female PMs because everybody thinks, oh, this is tech, this is a male-dominated field, this, that. So I'm searching for the women on this chat who have asked me a question, and the first person I found was Isha. Isha asked any particular skill sets, qualifications from a finance background. Again, I feel, Isha, I've answered this question. The fundamentals are the same. If you come from finance background, leverage more of your finance thinking, which is study more about metrics, analytics, models. Maybe that's so a PM is sort of T-shaped, like you need breadth and depth. Not every PM can be great at everything. Some PMs' depth is technology, some PMs is analytics and finance, some PMs is business strategy and thinking. So Isha, make that your depth. Rennie Varghese. Is Rennie on the call? I'll give it a minute if Rennie wants to come on the call. I assume Rennie Varghese is not on the call. I'll answer a question. What is the difference between a product designer and an engineer and product manager? So again, I feel I've talked you through this, but just to recap, a product manager is responsible for the why and collaborates with the designer engineer. Of course, the designer engineer affect the why as well, and they are also part PMs, but they are people who solve the what and the how, and they go deep. They are specialists. PM is a generalist. Now, that doesn't mean your engineer can't be a good PM or isn't thinking like a PM, but that may not be their full-time role. They have to think like a PM and write code. The designer has to think like a PM and design, whereas the PM might just be doing that generalist job. Shambhavi, I can't see your last name in this chat. She asks, I've seen a lot of PM have a background in analytics. Is it necessary if we want to make a career as a PM? So your question is analytics necessary? I would say definitely. This is my other kid. He's a year old. He may lunch at my laptop. Shambhavi, yes, analytics is definitely necessary because analytics is how you... Hi, Shambhavi. Shambhavi Dubey. It's good to see you. Good question. It is definitely necessary, more as a way to understand. I think like somebody else, I think Richa Gore asked, that she has a hypothesis, she's launched a version, how does she understand what happens? That's what analytics is used for. It's used for either understanding post the event or pre the event. Like there's heavy analytics on Microsoft Teams. People are looking at its usage and trying to understand. Like for example, we only use share screen once. So people are trying to understand why are people using share screen. On 100 people call, what is the correlation between using share screen or not? And maybe someone in Microsoft is thinking better screen sharing for 100 people call. Now that's something they saw in analytics, but they must have done research as well. So these are ways to understand the world around you, qual and quant. and the quantitative lens of understanding, which is analytics, is super important. When you say somebody background in analytics, what do you mean by that?
Sir, I mean that I did my research on LinkedIn. I just, because I'm interested in this role, so I just went through a profile of a few product managers, and I saw that earlier they were working as a business analyst or maybe a product analyst in some field, and then they
That's just
switched
the
to.
cohort you saw, right? Like that's just cohort you saw. Equally well, if you see another cohort, they might be engineers. I'm a designer. Like PMs come from all fields. If you're not a PM as an APM or something, then you must have done something else before becoming a PM. Typical roles which come into PM are business analysis, design, or engineering. And it's not surprising because those are adjacent roles. Like those are the three other people who work closely with PM. So they kind of at some point go, I want to do this job. So, but it's equally good or bad for you to come from analytics versus engineering versus design. Like you have to learn some other skill that you didn't have.
Sir, can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
So I'm an engineer. I don't electronics engineer. I did a little bit of coding in the starting, but then I realized that coding is not really my thing. So, sir, is it necessary that if you want to go into business analytics, you should have a very strong hold over coding? And if you don't have it, then you won't be successful.
No. I think that the amount of code you may need in sort of business analytics or data analytics is code to query and construct things. Like let's say you're working with a massive data set. I think both my kids want to join the call. If you're working with a massive data set, then you may want to write code. Can you take him away, please? I'm talking to some people. Thank you. Diggy may cry. Please, ले जाओ. It's okay. So you don't have to write extensive code, but I think like coding has become a skill these days, like anything else, right? Like I wish I could write better code. I don't need to, but if I could, I would query data faster instead of depending on a analytics person. And I think that helps me think. So as a business analyst, you often have to write queries and data. So people use Python, SQL, different things, R, the different languages for doing that, which is lighter weight code than what a software engineer would write. But knowing coding will never hurt you. It'll only be useful. It may be neutral to useful. It's never bad.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. I am getting called by the kids and wife. I'll just take one more question and then let's just have a general chat. Who has the last question?
Sir,
Go on. Yeah.
Sir, I would like to ask, at your time in IIT Guwahati, how was the product management scene then? Like, what was the craze about?
Zero.
What was the craze about that job profile?
Zero. It was zero because it was not just about IIT Guwahati. She wants to make a sign. Good. It was not just about IIT Guwahati. It was about the maturity of tech and PM in India in 2002 to 6. So this is like 15 years ago. It was not specific to IIT Guwahati. It was in general. So the scene wasn't big. I think at our time, interaction design, HCI, that scene was big. A lot of people wanted to be good designers. CS was always popular. Then management consulting, MBA was always popular. इसमें सबसे ज़्यादा पैसा है. That's also a good answer.
No, sir. The reason I find it interesting is because I like management. So managing things is my forte, I would say. So that's the reason why I like product management. Also, I like tech stuff about
Okay, so you
apps and
feel it's
all.
a combination of those things. Okay.
Yes.
But you can be a product manager in a non-tech environment as well. So I mean, it depends, right? Like if you want management, then management consulting, McKinsey, BCG, those are pure management, or like being a general manager. If you want deep tech engineer, if you want a mixture, like for people who have multiple interests and want to do hybrid things, this is a great role.
Yes, sir.
Hey Vinay, I had a question. Hello, am I audible?
Who is that? Yes,
Shyam.
you're audible. Shyam, I can't see you. Can you come on the line?
Okay. Can you see me now?
I can see you now.
Yeah. So, as you talked about transitioning into product management from designing, I was just curious that what if I'm a product manager and I want to transition into some other thing, maybe an engineer, or maybe in some core finance role, or in some analytics.
No problem. I mean, again, your PM background will only help you. It's not going to hurt you. And then you have to learn whatever's. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. You want to go? Sorry. You want to go? Or do you want to stay? Yeah. Bye. So it's not going to hurt you, and then you have to pick up whatever skills are necessary for that other thing you're going into. So if you're going into, let's say, core finance, and you want to be an investment banker or a financial analyst, then you have to pick up those skills in addition. But being a product manager is more like a general manager, so this is never going to hurt you, and it's not going to hamper you either. But that doesn't mean if you're a PM and you want to go into deep finance, you don't have to learn finance. You still have to learn that thing wherever you're going.
Okay, one more thing. I couldn't help notice, but there is a happy birthday card behind you. Did we interrupt any birthday party or any session?
No. This is actually a massive poster behind me of my daughter. So we celebrated her second birthday in India, and she was meeting her grandparents for not the first time, the second time. And they threw a big party. So they printed this wall-sized poster. And I didn't want to throw it away. So this poster is 2-3 years old now from my daughter's second birthday. We didn't want to throw it away, so we brought it to the other room and we put it in the background. Cool. With that, I'll have to wrap up, chaps. I would love some feedback from whoever. Shreyas, was this chat useful for you?
Yes, it was very useful, and we thank you for sharing your wonderful experiences and insights with us today.
Awesome.
It was interactive and very helpful.
You're most welcome. Look, I'm happy to help and mentor people on the side. I think so generally I say this to people. I mentor a lot of people in Facebook and even outside. If I become your mentor, so over time, I would love for people who are serious about PM as a role, you don't really need somebody like me to come and tell you a lot of the fundamentals. It's out there. There are courses, there are books, there are things, right? So invest your own time, effort. And generally people who I mentor, I want to see them do enough back as well. So generally, if I mentor people, I give them work to do. And if they haven't done that work, then they're not worth my time. And I go, cool. I think you should do it on your own and blah, blah. Because while this sort of general chat with students is great, everything that I told you right now, of course, it helps for having somebody like me who's done this for 10 years and comes and summarizes things. But nothing I told you is not out there on the internet, or you can't learn from reading good books or things. There's one course I would heavily recommend for everybody who wants to be a PM, or just for everybody who wants to do their startup. There's a course from Stanford called How to Start a Startup, run by Sam Altman. I would heavily recommend everybody do that course. It's a series of video lectures. If you do that, 80% of the questions you asked me today will be answered in a very systemic way in that course. So I'm one of those who pushes for structured learning as well as these chats. Because if you just have these chats and you're not learning anything on your own, then you're learning too slowly and you're not putting in enough to get something out of it. So that's what I'd like to leave you with. Thank you so much. This was great. I hope it was useful for you all as well. Please feel free. If we do this again, I'm happy to do this again. If we do this again, I'd love to go deeper with a group of people who indeed want to go deeper. Because this was a very sort of general purpose, high level, right? And if any of you have any questions, and I just to know, if you ask me a generic question which you could have Googled, then I will judge you and I will not have time for you anymore. If you ask me a great question, then I will appreciate you and I will have more time for you.
It was nice having you. Jai Jagannath.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you for your experiences. So that's it from our side, and stay tuned for any updates regarding the next episode.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.